Welcome to Diversity Conversations, where we engage in thought-provoking dialogue to identify leadership solutions to today's most challenging conflicts. Stream live each week, Saturday 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. Hosted by Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategist and CEOs Eric Ellis and Tommy Lewis. Join us and add your voice to this engaging diversity conversation.
Good morning, Greater Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky, the United States, and the world. My name is Eric Ellis, and I'm the President and CEO of Integrity Development Corporation. And I'm joined this morning by my good friend and brother,
Tommy Lewis, President and CEO of Make It Plain Consulting. Good early morning, Eric Ellis.
Good morning, Tommy Lewis. How are you this morning?
I'm doing well, Eric. It's very brisk outside once again. It seems like it's earlier than 9:30 Eastern right now.
Right. That's because you've been up all night, man. You know?
I know, right? But
Hey,
it's a fantastic morning.
It is a fantastic morning, man. I love to hear you say that word brisk. You know, I really appreciate that word, man. And how's your week been? Just talk about how this week has gone.
So we've had a little bit of an up and down week. Usually I start off with it's been fantastic. It's always fantastic, and sometimes it's better than other weeks. This week, we have been busy kind of delivering services, and some of the scopes of our work, Eric, have changed. So we've had to go back, do some tweaks, and that it's not just with one client. It's been with a couple. And so simultaneously last week, we had maybe 5 or 6 different projects that were adjusted, and which leads to or led to, all hands on deck. Right. And so with all hands on deck, I am still in the field servicing clients. My team is behind the curtain, trying to pull all the levers, switches. And sometimes we pull a trap door and something falls through, right?
So, I would say to other aspiring entrepreneurs, be careful what you pray for. You pray for business and success, and all of a sudden business and success starts pouring in, man, and it becomes problems.
It becomes a problem. It becomes a problem.
Yeah, I thank you for the blessings. You could just turn the spigot off for a minute.
Now, you did pray for this, didn't you? Right?
I'm glad we got that caveat that said you would never give me more than I can handle.
Right?
I feel like I'm at the limit right now,
Right. And at times, Eric, we, with all the blessings, like you said, that caveat, he won't put on us anything that we can't handle. Sometimes, at least for me last week, I had to throw my hands up and turn it back over to him. Right. Take the wheel, make this happen. And oftentimes, it's not every time, Eric, even last week with me, those 5 or 6 projects, the client knew they made the adjustments. They did not know, all the work that we were doing behind the curtain, but then they turned out and almost each and every one of them said, do you mind if you can get that to us, next Friday and not this Friday? And I'm like, absolutely. Thank you. So
yeah, we have no problem with that. Whatever you need,
whatever you need, right? Whatever you need.
I got another week, a whole other week.
How was your week?
Well, I had a good week, Tommy, but again, busy as well. And, it just takes a lot of energy. You know what? I tell you, Tommy, learning and continuing to learn and grow is not always easy as well. When we have to try to live out the values that we teach, sometimes that can be difficult. Apologizing, growing, learning, working with people that are new at things. We're working with some new sort of diversity council individuals that some of them are leading and have never really led committees or councils or things like that before, man. And so it really is, there's a huge gulf between sometimes what they believe leadership means and what it really means in the real world. So that's been interesting. And I have been preparing a lesson that I'll be teaching on Monday about empathic leadership and psychological safety. And I enjoy that. I've been talking about psychological safety for a couple of years now, but you also have to keep learning it and applying it. And the more you learn about what it means as a leader to create psychological safety, the more it challenges you to keep growing, to keep being open, to keep listening, to keep making sure that you're creating the kind of environment that everybody around you is liberated to unlock their voice. In this psychological safety, we talk about the 4 stages of psychological safety. Stage number 1 is really in inclusion safety, that a person is just included because they are a human being. They don't have to do anything special. You just make them feel welcome. It's one of the natural needs that individuals have. As we look at what Abraham Maslow talked about in terms of hierarchy of needs. Number 2 is sort of learner safety, that people have to be safe to keep learning and be encouraged by you to keep learning and growing. And then contributor safety is even a difficult one, where you are really seeking to understand people's strengths and you're welcoming in what they have to offer. And then the 4th stage is challenging the status quo. And as I looked at that, Tommy, and looked at all the corporations that have failed, if you look at sort of post-mortem, what happened to them, most of it was tied to a lack of challenge the status quo and inability. It's not that they didn't have answers, but they weren't willing to listen to those, to buy into those, to implement those, and it ultimately led to their demise. And so you and I, as thoughtful as we are about things, we have to always be open to the challenge that comes to us from people that work with us, whether it be consultants, staff, clients. And when we have to live out these things, Tommy, and not just give a good speech on them, man, that's not always the easiest, but I'm so convinced that it's the best.
Well, let me ask you, Eric, when the times that you've worked with organizations or individuals and you have seen that they have some hesitation or even denial with addressing and moving beyond the status quo, right? What are some of the things that you have seen with regards to why companies want to stay within the status quo?
It's comfortable. It is sometimes it's arrogance. When you are in leadership and you get this thing on a rhythm, it's easy to show up, every day and do the same thing. And if you can create an unsafe psychological environment where people are just smiling and saying nice things to you and never pushing back, then that's comfortable.
Mm.
But Tommy, it's not helpful, and it certainly doesn't allow us to. And growth takes effort. You have to do
Yeah.
something. You got to work. You got to learn something new. And I love learning, man. Not always though. Sometimes I just want to kind of sit back and say, okay, can we
Right.
kind of do it how we did it yesterday? And so learning's not always easy. And so I find it, and nobody really, the way I see it today, Tommy, is that all too often, not enough people are truly taking ownership for the success of an organization. They're just maintaining the time frame that they're given.
Mm.
And they don't think further than that. And so they don't look forward to the potential demise that can happen. I'm looking at some data around the S&P 500 and how long it takes before a company loses its competitive value advantage. And so, it used to be, I think in 1960 or something like that, 1967, it was 33 years. So an S&P 500 company had 33 years before somebody else came along and knocked them off the block. And then about 2016, it went down to 24 years. And by 2027, it's going to be 12 years. So you've got an advantage. 12 years from now, the market's got you. And
Wow.
so what that means then is if you aren't innovating, Tommy, then you'll be overtaken. And there are some companies that it's a part of their DNA to keep looking forward and to keep unlocking the brains within their organizations and their sphere of influence so they can stay alive. So you're dodging the competitors that are seeking to sink your ship. And if you don't have challenger safety where people can challenge the status quo, then the likelihood of you being able to innovate, what they say, Timothy Clark, Dr. Reggie Crane gave us both this book on psychological safety, but Timothy Clark talks about sort of what you want to do is create sort of a high level of intellectual friction within your organization and then a low level of social friction. So you want people to be able to always challenge ideas and then not feel like we're in a fight when we're doing that. And that's the part, Tommy, that we have to keep looking at, is making sure that if there is an argument and a debate, am I leading that? And am I leading that from a place of defensiveness? And Tommy, I wish I could say that I'm never defensive, man. Man, I'd love to be able to say that that's one of my greatest traits.
Right.
But sometimes I think, Tommy, that can happen to you.
Yeah.
And sometimes people are defensive. And so both of us are sort of jousting with the sword of defensiveness. And what I've learned is that sometimes I have to go back, shut up, quiet up, retool, walk away for a minute, gather myself, and then come back with a fresh perspective and a fresh openness, and a recognition that when people sometimes around you are arguing with you, it's because they care deeply. And that is a value that you want to appreciate, that somebody cares enough on my team or whatever to really debate something. Because in the end, we all want what's best for the client. So, Tommy, all that growth, man, it's just not stuff that you and I are speaking and teaching to others, man. We're living that. We're trying to live that. Even with my own children, watching them grow up, and all of them are bosses, man. I got 4 kids. They all are bosses. I got this, Daddy. I don't need your help now. I got this. And it's like, okay. Okay. And I laugh with Judy, man, because we were just looking at my kids operating in that space. And I was saying, all 4 of them are like bosses. I wonder where they got that from. We looked at each other, man.
As both of you pointing at each other.
Yeah,
right?
get them off. And so, but that's a beautiful thing when you put it in perspective. The last thing I want to share that happened this week, I didn't even talk about the work stuff, but who cares? With clients. But I had a chance to talk with Ralph Lee this week. And a couple of days ago, man, we had one of the most amazing conversations, man. And I just loved, he was telling me a story about his eldest son taking him to a football game between the Bengals and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And he said, Eric, he said, I'm experiencing a changing of the guard. He said, my son and I went to the game. He said he picked me up. He drove me there. We were out. It was a little brisk. And he said, Daddy, you got your hand warmers? And then he looked back and say, hey, you might want to pull that hat down around your ears. It looked brisk out here. And then he was getting him hot dogs and things. And he said, then when we left the game, he said, I just watched him cheer and he was up the whole game, just having a ball. He said, and then when we left the stadium and went to the car, he was like, you need me to go get the car and pick you up, or, and he said, I started recognizing that he was doing for me everything that I did for him when he was a kid.
Yes, sir.
And so he called it a changing of the guard. And he said he just went home and just wept. And that's just beautiful, man, that Tommy, the investment that we make in the children that we love, that we get a chance to see them grow up. And if I talk about it too long, man, I'll get emotional right now.
Yes,
I'm just grateful for everything that we've poured in to them. And when they come back with their ability to debate and to lead, those are the things that are going to protect them for a lifetime. And they've got what they need, like that commercial that says it's in there.
Mhm.
It's in there, Tommy. The things that they'll need, man, to sustain themselves. You and I have poured them that into them. Some great things that are going to help them, and some things that they're going to have to work through. So,
Eric, this is, for whatever reason, as we meet on Saturdays, we don't always know what the agenda is, what the script is, what the plan is, but it's always right on time. Your words and your story with Ralph Lee, it is speaking to me as I'm going to struggle through the emotion as well, where, with our children, we hope we are pouring into them
that's right.
water that is full of minerals that they can kind of grow from and just continue to tap into.
Yep.
We don't always know. We're
That's right.
doing our
That's right.
absolute best
Right.
for those who are doing their absolute best.
Right.
And again, not speaking about those who know they can do better and not do better. I'm
Right.
talking about the ones that saying, in my thought, my mind of minds and my soul of souls, I'm doing it my best.
Right.
And then to see those seeds grow
Right.
and create shade and shelter for you. Shade and shelter. As you have done that for them for many, many years, things you've done that they don't even know or remember.
Right.
And so I wanted to kind of talk to you about that, Eric. In your life and wisdom, there are things that you have experienced and even forgotten, right? That your children and other people's children, they don't even know that you experienced that 40 years ago and you forgot that you experienced it. And now they're going through it.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a small memory like, this looks familiar.
Right.
If you keep digging down, it's like, oh yeah, I remember that, 1983, 1987, 1977,
Right.
you can go back to it. So when you are talking with Ralph Lee and others who are in this season of life with their seeds growing to full trees, right?
Yeah.
What does it feel like? What are you thinking when literally you have more years behind you and the wisdom that comes with that, and you're seeing your seed, your children go to the next level? And I'll say this, that there's some immortality as well, that hopefully you won't see them come into their fullness, right? Because you have transitioned.
That's right.
Yeah, we don't want to see our children move on before us, right?
That's right. That's right.
So I'm asking you, as you're talking with Ralph and talking with others, and even with your children, what are you thinking? What are you feeling right now in this moment, in this season?
And I'll just say a word about it, and then our guest is here, and so we'll transition to bringing her on stage. So we're looking forward to hearing from her and meeting her. But I'll tell you, it's a deep question, Tommy. And I'll tell you what's interesting is that the older you get, hopefully, the calmer you get. And all the things that seem like they were such big deals as you were growing up now become nothing but small lessons. And the problems were minor interruptions. And I know that's why grandparents are so funny. They were really challenging and hard on their kids, but now as grandparents, they're like, don't yell at the baby, all that.
Right.
That's a part of what happens, Tommy, is that you get to a place where everything is eternal. It's sweetness, it's kindness, it's a lot of love, it's a lot of admiration. That's where I am right now, man. I am grateful that I can celebrate each moment. And I just, it's almost like, I don't know, our body knows that at some point we're going to leave this earth. And so I'm glad, Tommy, that I'm not the guy that's missing that point. I'm
Yes,
not gonna
sir.
get that point, man. I'm sucking it up right now. I am sucking it up. At Thanksgiving, at Christmas, I was just watching my kids, man, and saying, do you all recognize how beautiful this is? That in this room together are people that love each other. And the details of the interruptions and the ups and downs, that's not it for me. I don't sweat that for you. I'm looking at the whole body of work. And almost like God said on the seventh day, it is good. That's what I say, Tommy. I
Yes.
just look at my seed and I say, God, this is good.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And thanks, Eric. Before we bring our guest on, we're very, very excited to have Kelly Fraser Cox join us this morning. Want to give a shout out to T. Cooley out West Coast, out West where it's best. Always joining us. It's the West Coast time frame there, brother. We'll definitely get you that Make It Plain hoodie, that 5X large for real men, right?
That's right.
Hey, I'm 5'11", 200 pounds. I wear strong, large, maybe an extra large. But T. Cooley, he is a gentle giant, giant. Eric Ellis and T. Cooley know each other a little bit better. So I don't want to speak out of turn, but I love the brother too.
Yeah,
I've
he's
had some
really my
conversations.
brother, man. He's closer to me than even some of many of my blood family, man. So there's nobody. That's the best friend in the world, man. Between you and T, I'm in good shape.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So let's bring up our guest. We have again Kelly Fraser Cox joining us. Good morning, Kelly.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So this is a conversation, as you know, you may have heard as you were standing by in the green room and diversity conversations. We've been around for some time, five plus years with brother Eric Ellis and I, and we are honored to have you this morning. We'll start off by asking you, tell us a little bit about yourself. We'll jump into some questions. We have our community that typically will jump in via the chat, and they're always listening across the U.S. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, actually, I just want to jump in a little bit on what y'all were talking about before.
All right.
Come on now. Exactly.
I'll get to the introduction. I will.
Right.
But I'm a caretaker for my mother, and she's been disabled for the past 3 years or so.
All right.
And you talk about wanting to honor and love and cherish your family. This has brought that to light for me beyond more than anything before. And when I think about our core values and the things that we want to be remembered for and our legacy, honoring our family is one of those things and one of the values I strongly believe in. And my mother was a trailblazer. She was one of those first women in her university, Black women in her university, first Black woman in the boardroom, C-level executive. And I want to honor her legacy and the sacrifices that she made so that we could be here today, right? And so being her caretaker, though, yes, we have our crazy days.
Right, I understand.
We have our crazy days, but at the end of the day, it's about honoring that love, that sacrifice, and carrying on the legacy that she helped to build for all of us. So what y'all were talking about, it really touched me, and it is part of how I try to live every day. So thank you for bringing that just to light.
Kelly, I love that.
I do too.
I'll jump in and say that as my mother, so my father was with me for a short amount of time, 48 years, and then he died of a massive heart attack. And then my mother had almost like a nervous breakdown. And so for the last 15 years of her life or so, she was in a nursing home. And she was a preacher, and so she was an evangelist, went all over the country doing tent meetings and things like that. And then I watched my mother be down and, in a nursing home. But every week that I went to see her, she was always positive and smiling. And I couldn't understand that, like, God, she's been traveling all over the world and now she's bound to this bed and she's in here every day. And I might not get to see her but once a week. And yet she's always positive, glad to see me and never complaining. And I'm saying, wow, if she can be in here, brightening up the lives and the days of all the workers. never complaining to me that I'd like to see my grandkids even more. Never saying any of that. Just being a blessing. And I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
You know, I don't have anything to complain about. And I was grateful for that. When my dad was alive, and then we'll get back to you, he was closest to me. But right before he died, I saw that my mother loved me, because, you know, and it was almost like God was helping me for the period that my father would be gone, that I would have a parent that I understood that loved me deeply. So kudos to you. And I can tell you that it's never easy being a caretaker, and there may not be that many people that you can talk to about
Right.
the difficult challenges, because that's not always I'm a servant leader and happy. You know, there's some real challenges that go with that.
Yeah.
But I'm so grateful that your mother had a daughter that understood the blessing that you have to be her caretaker.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that, honestly. And she inspires me. You know, she lost the ability to talk and communicate. So when she's practicing and, you know, working through her therapy, and she gives this face, it's like it's almost regal. You know, when she gets that determination and she's like, I'm gonna conquer this, I'm gonna get this,
Come on.
you know. And I think, yeah, work is challenging.
Yeah.
But this is next level, and it just puts everything in perspective.
And she's still being a role model to you.
Absolutely.
How do we operate when things get even more difficult? How do we squeeze joy and life out to even the expressions? Oh, come on, sis. You know,
Come on now. Yep.
Y'all gonna have me crying by the end of this episode.
Yeah. Hey, you, Kelly, you are the seed that she poured into you, and now you are the shade for her, the comfort. You are the trunk of that tree, right? That she can lean onto, right? So as we were talking about beginning with the introduction, sometimes with introductions, we tell people what we do. We don't always tell people who we are. You just shared who you are, a caregiver for your mother. And again, caregiving is not just helping folks move from the bed to the chair, down the hallway. No, it is your full self.
Yeah.
And then when those difficult times come, right? That doubt, uncertainty, you are there to communicate with your mother. That's not always verbal, not always nonverbal. It is spiritual. There's a connection because you're connected. I don't know what God has in store for us today. Something is happening. Something is happening, Eric.
Lift each other
Kelly.
up. That's what it's
Yeah,
about.
that's what it's about. That's
Well,
what
let me
it's
say
about.
this. I want to jump in on that, Tommy. Kelly, you do get to talk even more. But I want to jump in because we spend so much time in life talking about things that don't matter.
Come on.
And it's very so Tommy and I started this over 5 years ago, and both of us knew that we were so busy that there was a high probability we might not make it through that first year. And we knew we weren't going to be signing up for no 3 to 5 years. We would have never said yes if somebody told us it's 3 to 5. No, bro, I'm out. But for some crazy reason, God has kept us together and really allowed us to see this as iron sharpening iron. And every time we want to move to a place of a greater agenda and more targeted focus, somehow our plans get scuttled. And we find ourselves back in the hands of God and at the mercy of whatever sometimes comes up. And I think that it's in those moments, it's in that space that God can speak and help the world see what really matters.
Yes.
Because so often the things that we talk about may or may not matter. But when we meet a gift like you, and you come here with these stories that never make it on anybody's airwaves,
Right.
we just talk about it before the show starts, and then we get the music comes on, and then we get into the details of improving people's lives through data.
Yeah.
That's the low shit. That's not the high mark. That's the low mark. The high mark is, who are you?
Mhm,
How are you showing up in this world? And
mhm,
what are you doing that really, really matters?
mhm,
And so you've already introduced us to the greatest parts of you that really matter. And
mhm,
that's that you have found it in your heart to love somebody so deeply that you are getting joy out of serving them.
yes.
And although your mother can't speak right now,
Mhm,
she is speaking
Mhm.
us through your
Yeah.
voice.
Yeah.
mhm.
And as we hear you and see you and hear what you're doing, we are blessed because of the work of your mother.
Well, and part of what I want to make sure people understand is, finding your values and finding who you are usually comes out of tragedy. And for me, it was when my father passed, who was
Mhm.
my just best friend in the whole world.
Mhm.
And I just didn't know what to do
Right.
after I lost him. That
Right.
forced me to really look inside and say, what do
Mm,
I care about? How do
mm,
I want to be known?
mm,
What matters to me? And a friend of mine actually said, you know what? We had a rough period. I had lost a lot of people in a short period of time. And she said, you've been writing all these obituaries. You should write yours.
Mm.
And I thought that is the most morbid thing I have ever
right.
Right.
heard.
I'm not going to be writing my obituary so somebody can
But
run me
I
over
did
tomorrow.
it. But it was a blessing. It was one
Mm.
of the most transformative exercises I had ever done because it gave me clarity and it forced me to sit down and say, what matters? Because at that point, I was a global director. I was traveling the world. I had a great team. I had success by, the normal standards, but was I living what
Mm,
was important?
mm,
And it was through that moment that I began to feel who I really am, not just being the professional, not just the monetary metrics, and
mm,
moving to that next stage.
mm.
So, I feel like this is all kind of tying together on showing up as your true self, as your best self, and that being grounded in those values is really how you get to that place.
We want to hear that obituary now.
You
We
know?
want to hear it. We want to hear it. That would be asking too much if it wasn't. If at any time you feel inspired to pull it up,
Okay.
Tommy and I are, because I think you have introduced us to something that I've not heard before, Tommy.
I agree.
Yeah, and I'll tell you
Mhm.
that it's probably an exercise that all of us
Mhm.
need to engage in,
Mhm.
because we live and then we die, and then somebody else writes the obituary.
Mhm.
But
Well, think about it as a strategist, right? In a company, as we think about, the milestones of what we want to achieve as a business, I would always tell my team, let's begin with the end in mind, right?
Mhm,
Where do we want to go? And then let's engineer the best way to get there.
mm,
But we don't do that with our lives,
mm.
right? So in writing that obituary, that was that moment for me of, okay, how can I purposely and consciously live my life to get to this point where I want to be remembered?
Mm. Mm. So
I
I'm
am done right
curious.
now.
Yeah. In your work, in your business, you engage with C-suite leaders, leaders at all levels, not just the C-suite, but leaders, in their respective rights. And these are individuals, these are people.
Mhm.
Um, and as you were talking, I was curious. I don't know if all leaders are looking at the end in mind. I don't know if it's, the next week, the next month, the next quarter, the next goal, but what's the end game, right?
Mhm.
The end game. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what you do in your business, what it does, and, even some examples of some leaders that were not as receptive to your blessing and or services and
Right.
said, basically, I don't need you. I got it all. I got it from here, love.
Right.
Can you
Oh,
talk about that?
well, my career has spanned the last 25 years, and it's mostly been in a commercial space. So I began in sales and client management, later moving into things like learning and development and general management. But I was so blessed to have worked not just throughout the US, but across the world and see so many different cultures and approaches and just ways and perspective of living. But through that, I realized that there's kind of this common theme that no matter where I was, people cared about, which was respect. Whether that was Asia, Latin America, Europe, they wanted to be seen, heard, and respected for who they are. And part of being a leader is we don't think about that. We're just about getting the job done. How do we get to the quarter number? How do we achieve this target? And we forget about that piece. So as a leader, I spent a lot of time developing people who worked with me because they could feel that investment and that care, and that pushed them to the next level. But I realized how limited that was, and I wanted to expand that influence. So I started Promote Leaders, which is my executive coaching practice. And in that, I'm able to really work with people one-to-one to figure out how they can align who they are with what they need to do in the business. So a lot of people are in crisis right now, especially coming out of COVID. Who am I? Am I in the right job? What should I be doing? And so that piece has been critical of helping people understand first, uncover who they are, because it's not for me to tell them. They have to figure that out, right? So to uncover who they are, and then how does that apply in their current workspace? And sometimes it means leaving their job. Sometimes it means advancing or trying new things, but helping them with those baby steps so that they can be truly their best selves day to day. Now, I am working with senior level executives who have been very successful, and they're thinking, why do I have to change? Like, I've been good. But their leadership team has said, oh, you need to change.
Right.
So within that, we've started to have conversations that are more along the lines of how can you expand your impact? What you've done has gotten you here, and we want to recognize that and honor that. But in order to really get as many people on board as possible to exceed that target that you put out there, how can we enhance your toolkit? And that begins the process of what can you add, which usually is around how you adapt to the people around you to get the best out of them. So Tommy, I hope that answered your question.
Absolutely does. Absolutely does. And you're located in Cincinnati, Ohio?
I'm actually in Chicago.
Chi-town.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm right outside downtown.
Okay. So yeah, much apologies there. Much
No worries,
apologies.
yeah.
Born and raised, give us a little bit about your background there, and then we'll move into kind of a little bit more about how that might connect to what you do today.
Sure. My background, I grew up on the south side of Chicago. Went to college on the East Coast. I went to Wharton at UPenn, met my husband there, moved to DC, and lived on the East Coast for a long time, and then was so blessed and happy to come home to Chicago because it's my home. I'm a Midwest girl. I missed it. And from here, I lived in London for a while, so have just bounced around a bit and had lots of different experiences.
Kelly, did you go through Inroads when you were in Chicago?
I sure did.
I would think so. Floyd Brady was one of the vice presidents of Inroads. I don't know if you remember that name.
I do.
And the father, whatever his name, the founder, was in Chicago.
Yeah. No, that program was a blessing. It really was.
Okay. Yeah, Frank Carr, the founder. Frank Carr.
Thank you, Tommy. Right.
But the one thing from my background I want to highlight is I grew up in almost two different worlds. So my mother was a senior level executive. We had a beautiful home, access to private schools. And my father was a police detective, and I come from 3 generations of police officers.
Wow.
And so what that really allowed me to do was be able to move and flow between different worlds and see very different lifestyles and what people struggle with. And that, I think, really allowed me to relate to a lot of different kinds of people. And especially, again, working internationally, understanding that some of the challenges of multi-generational homes, coming up out of poverty, immigrant families, and what they go through, it allowed me, I think, to connect in a different way that my colleagues weren't able. And so being able to use that same idea and work with my clients today, a lot of what they tell me is just, you just seem really easy to talk to. I feel safe in this space. I can actually share that thing that's been weighing me down and maybe holding me back so that they can actually examine it and address it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's powerful. And so, what are you seeing people being able to accomplish through your coaching? I also serve as an executive coach in our business as well, and I've got a couple clients that are moving between the old contract and a new contract. And I've had a couple people that I've coached call me up and say, "Eric, I'll pay myself."
Mm.
I'll pay myself. And I said, no, I mean, no, I don't want you to do that. Let's just schedule a time.
Mm.
And it's interesting that once people find a safe place to
Mm.
be able to have these honest conversations. So, what are you seeing people being able to accomplish, and what do you think is most successful for you
Mhm.
as a coach? We certainly know that listening is one of the big things, being a listening ear. But process-wise, what have you found to be successful?
Well, there's a particular model that I like to follow. It's called COMB. It's a old, capabilities, opportunities, your motivation equals your behavior, right? And so, kind of looking at each of those components to see where the gap is a good starting point. But what I'm finding is that because we are so incredibly busy and just on that treadmill of 12
Yeah,
back-to-back meetings and travel, all that good stuff, people aren't taking the time to really understand who they are first. And
yeah.
so all of the coaching sessions really begin with that because you can't influence your team, you can't help others if you really don't get what's going on inside first.
Mm, mm.
So, whether that's an assessment that we take to help build some common language or just through discussions of what are your values, right? What are your
Yeah,
priorities? What do you care about? But then how do you add value, which is different? It's how do your priorities show up?
Mm.
And so bringing those strengths to the table. And there's a lot of discussion right now about strengths and highlighting strengths and
yep,
managing
yep.
strengths. But
Love
what we
that.
don't talk about are the triggers.
Mm.
What are the things that set you off? Because if you don't know that,
Okay, I
that's
like
when the
that.
unintentional stuff starts to happen. Right. So for me, being in a commercial role for so long and coming from this amazing family where we talk about honor and integrity and things like that all the time, but in a commercial role where people have terrible impressions of salespeople, they
Right,
immediately think that instead of trying to solve your problem, you're being cheated on price or something like that.
right,
So
right.
in a negotiation, someone would say, I think you're misleading me, or I think this isn't the right price. And it would send me over the edge. And that's
Right.
because it violated my value of integrity.
Mm,
And I
mm,
didn't know that at first. And I was like, why am I getting so upset? Why is this client
right.
just getting at me? I don't understand why. But it wasn't until that unlock happened that then I could approach those conversations differently and say, this
Mm,
is a negotiation tactic. It's not about me.
right,
You know, how do
right.
you figure that out? And it's not until you dig into those triggers that you get to that point. So
Mm,
understanding some of that helps. And then the last piece is really knowing how you add value and how you're unique. So
mhm.
when you talk about things like imposter syndrome, right? When
Yeah.
people feel like they don't feel comfortable, they don't know why they're in the room. My clients, we talk about this all the time because they've made it, right? They're in the room. They're a director of X. They're the
Right.
C-suite X, but they don't feel like they should be there. And so, how do we have that conversation around you might be different from the people in the room? That's fair, but you're in the room for a reason. Let's figure out what that is. And as soon as you start to feel that imposter syndrome, think about how can you apply what you're best at to help? How can you use that in service so that you're getting out of your mind and focusing on how you can either help the company, your team, your clients. And that changes that little shift. It all of a sudden can build up some confidence on now you've got something good to say. And you know why? Because you know who it's in service of.
Let me ask you this because, I'm going to take a leap out here and say that when I've heard people talk about imposter syndrome, it's been mostly women.
Mm,
And so I would say to you, here's my analysis of this
mm,
is that I've heard my wife talk about freely about sometimes feeling imposter syndrome.
mm,
Men have been brought up that we don't care about anything. Nothing hurts us. We're always qualified for everything. So we're playing this game of, I could never see myself as imposter. I prepared. The reality is that quietly, we too feel that. You feel that, wow, I'm doing something. I'm just learning something now. I'm teaching it. When am I going to get found out? That we know that women oftentimes have to be 95 to 99% qualified for a job to go after it. Men at 60%, I'm your guy. I'm your guy.
I'll learn it. I'll figure it out. I'm smart.
Yeah. And they just can't do anything. But so how do you navigate that conversation? Number one, do you see that gender sort of difference between women being more honest and being more willing to own some of the feelings that they have and the emotions that they have and the challenges that they have, thinking I'm prepared to do this role, versus men?
I'm trying to think of how I want to answer that.
Okay.
So I have seen this cut across gender.
Yep. I can see
sure.
that. Because people trust you, and you'll find them really very quickly probably coming to some transparency.
Yes.
Yeah.
So and even as a leader,
Yes.
manager, you can see you're getting ready to promote someone, and you can feel that hesitation of,
Okay.
now me, okay,
Right.
So being able to read that person across from you. But I will say this, and this is not gender specific, that I've seen imposter syndrome pop up in a few ways. One is that I'm shrinking myself. I think, I'm not sure if I should be here.
Right.
The others may be turning down opportunities. I'm not going to go to that networking event. I'm not going to apply for that promotion. But then I've also seen it as aggression. So someone who is maybe a little bossier, maybe pointing that finger, distracting. It's a distraction technique. Don't look at me, look at them. So, let's broaden this idea of what it is and what it could look like. But with that, I also want to add, I don't think imposter syndrome is a terrible thing.
Right.
It's about how we frame it.
Right.
And right now we're framing it as this is my curse word in our coaching sessions is the word should. I should know this. I should have done that. I should have said this, And that is what feeds that, paralysis of not doing what you need to move forward.
Right.
But instead, if we looked at imposter syndrome as a sign that we are pushing ourselves, that we're stretching ourselves, we're moving into this area of uncomfortability to grow and evolve, then it's a signal that we're actually helping. We're doing more. We're pushing beyond the day-to-day. So if we look at it that way, I don't think imposter syndrome is a bad thing. But it can show up in different ways.
Right.
I like that as well. As you were sharing, Kelly, I'm thinking, and I'm laughing to myself. I've been a board member. I'm a board member of a number of different organizations, but one is a university, a college. And I've been on the board for 5 years, and most of the board members are in their 80s plus, white and wealthy. It's a Catholic school, private school, if you will. And so I'm on this board, and I contribute where I think I can, right? I've always contributed that way, put my 2 cents, maybe a dime. Every now and then, again, I'll drop a quarter. Right. But Tommy has something to say. Right. And then 3 months ago, the board chair, the president of the college, and 2 other board members who I look at in high esteem, they approached me to be the board chair.
Right.
And so I have since accepted that role, and I'm sitting in the role with the imposter syndrome, like.
When they're gonna figure out that I'm not that guy.
because my MO was lifting from underneath, right, to push people up. I don't necessarily have to lead everything. I run my own business and all that good stuff.
That's right.
But when you were just speaking, I was thinking to myself, and thank you, Kelly, so much. I wonder what other people had been thinking of me such that they invited me to be the chair.
Yeah.
And I wonder if they are working through and grasping and looking for answers just like I am.
Yeah.
We're all imposters trying to figure this thing out. You
Yeah.
made it crystal clear to me just right there.
Mhm.
Right. So thank you. Thank you. A quick follow-up question.
Mm.
In your previous statement, you had talked about you self-reflecting, right?
Mm.
Going back, taking a look at some things. Talk to us about when you are with a client or you have a client and they have some reservations or they may not have the full capability to reflect, to see themselves in the moment. I'm thinking of a couple of national people who are historically known for not reflecting,
Mhm.
right? Just bulldozing through everything.
Mhm.
But in your cases where the person says, I don't have time to self-reflect. We just got to plow forward. And what's done is done. That's in the past. Don't reflect. What are your thoughts about that?
So many thoughts. In a coaching session, before we even start, there are some ground rules of being willing to do some of the work
Mhm.
that I can't do it for them. No one is going to tell them the right answer. They should hire a consultant if they want someone to come in and provide a framework and just say, implement that. Right. That's a consultant's job. Coach's job is to kind of pull it out of them and help them just be a guide to help them through those steps. Now, it depends on the kind of person I'm working with, because if someone's, let's say, very direct, very to the point, very target driven, I try to tie the work to that. Right? If you missed your target for the last 3 years, let's talk about why. Let's talk about how some of these changes could help pull more from your team. Let's talk about what we could do here to help impact your number. Now, of course, I'm hoping as we talk, we get beyond that. But it's how do we start that conversation? And then on the other side of it, let's say I have someone who's very analytical. They want the data. Show me how coaching is, improving people's lives. I want to know, am I going to improve 5% or 50%? But through that's when we use, let's say, something like a Gartner or an HBR article, something with that grounding of data, but using it as a way to give them exercises to break it. I try to take it from the opposite. I'm not going to prove to you this works. You prove to me why it doesn't. And through that process, they start to have their own light bulbs. So my job is to create the environment where they can bring their light bulbs to the situation. And it should be through their lens of how they process life and how they, their values and how they process information.
That's phenomenal. That's phenomenal. The space that we work in, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, we often say that the work starts with the individual, right? And that individual, with whatever their goals, personal or professional goals are, whatever they find that resonates with them, their target, their carrot, that's what people will do, right? In other words, in our personal lives, at least with my wife, she always tells me, you spend time where you want to spend time with where your energy is, right? You want to go shopping?
I can guess what that does not include. Let's see.
Right. So some people say, I don't want to spend a lot of energy looking at myself. And at the same time, they want other people to perform and look at themselves and improve themselves. And so we have this kind of conflict of interest, if you will. The leader is not looking at themselves to be a better leader, but expecting his or her followers to improve based on performance evaluations and appraisals and metrics and all that good stuff. But I think we're all people at the end of the day, imperfect people who will, at times, if not more often than not, continue to make mistakes. And if we make the same mistakes, we might be the problem, right? In my mind, problem may be a harsh word,
Mhm.
but I'm going at it and I am intentionally not trying to improve on some of the nuances that are creating those barriers, those problems, such
Mhm.
as maybe my leadership style is
Right.
just it's brash. I'm a
Mhm.
tyrant and I'm thinking that I'm a collaborator,
Mhm.
right? Like you said, everybody else around me is like, no, you need coaching, Tommy. You need
Right.
it. Well, I'm the best. I'm the best leader since sliced bread.
Right.
No, you're kind of stale,
But
right?
that's where the questioning becomes
Okay.
so important, right? Because part of the reason why we're getting that defensiveness is because everyone's telling them, right? They're telling them they're too direct. They're telling them they're not doing a good job. They're telling them they're the reason why they're so high attrition in their group. And what's a natural response to that? It's
Right.
defensiveness, right? You're
Defensive.
protecting yourself. And I think in the coaching relationship, as we're trying to figure out the what you care about, what you're good at, what makes you you, then we can highlight here's how that's good. Here are the scenarios where this works great. But here are these scenarios where you have gaps. And it's through the questioning that we get there. And I'll give you an example. I recently did a session on inclusive leadership. And I started with the question of tell me a time that you felt included. And whenever people start these sessions, they always start with the negative. And keep in
Yeah.
mind, people are showing up
Right.
negative, right?
Right.
Underrepresented groups are showing up negative because they're like,
Yeah.
nothing's going to change.
Yeah.
The dominant group is showing up negative because, oh, everyone's going to tell me how terrible a person I am for the next hour. So you're already in this situation. But by starting with, tell me about a time you felt included, you're changing the vibration of that entire interaction.
Mhm.
And now people are in a space where they're reflecting on a positive moment where they felt like they were part or contributing in a big way. And then the question after that is, do you think your team feels that way?
Mhm.
Hmm.
You know, how are you bringing this to the group? Why would you not want everyone on your team to feel like you do right now?
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
now we're opening that discussion.
right. I love that, Kelly. Let me ask you this because as we look at the world today, it seems like we have a lot of people, certainly if they're in the public eye, that seem to be operating out of an unreflected upon life and
Mhm.
leadership style.
Mhm.
It's about gamesmanship, it's about strategy, it's about the speech, it's about the angle. I mean, if we look at our politicians, it's just hopeless to look at this. Uh, but as I think about other leaders as well, it's almost like they are so busy trying to do something to people, get people to do something, or frustrated by what people aren't doing.
Mhm.
How do you transition people from the gamesmanship aspect of leadership to really desiring a reflective leadership style that I'm willing to even communicate that out loud to others? That I'm not here just to do something to you or to get you to do something, but I'm constantly looking. Here's what I feel good about. Here's what I'm concerned about in my own style. Or is there other feedback? How do you get people to get that transition?
Mm. Well, when I think about the best leaders or maybe authentic leaders, they approach it from three different angles. It's first understanding your values and what you care about, right?
Mhm.
Your strengths, and then how you relate to others. So, valuing yourself, your skills, and then valuing the people around you. I
Okay.
think that's part of it. But the first piece of that authenticity is doing that reflection.
Mhm.
But we think about, that word authenticity is so loaded, right? It could mean
Yes. Yeah.
so many different
Yeah.
things. But what
Yeah.
it means to me is that your thoughts, your intent, and your behaviors all line up,
Yeah.
right? So your values line up. And part of that transition as we move to valuing others is people feel like there's only one way to honor their values. And what I try to help people see is
Mm,
that your
that's good.
value doesn't change, but your message could change. your approach could change. But as long as your values are consistent, people see that and they acknowledge it and they want to follow people who are honoring their values. And so when you're dealing with someone who's an opposite style from yours, you know, if you have to give a tough message that they're underperforming, that doesn't change. You still have to give that tough message. And if you have a value of transparency or honesty, you know, you still can honor that. But are you doing it in a way that's going to tear that person down? Or are you doing it in a way that lifts them up? And lifting them up in the way that they want to receive that information. So, you know, that to me is the transition, and how leaders communicate is such a missing piece today.
Yes,
If we can figure out how to communicate to people in ways that they understand, that message will then resonate. And now you've got people who want to, you know, run through the wall for you. They want to get there. They feel like they're contributing in how they're special to the goal. And the more we can help leaders realize that, I think the better followership they'll receive, but also the better overall leader they can become.
Well, I'll tell you, it is shocking here that we have arrived at 10:30 in no time flat. I mean, literally, you just blaze through that. We can see how your clients, if they're on the clock, I mean, if they're paying by the time, it's over for them. I mean,
It's over.
we should be working on scheduling our next session.
Yeah, right.
6 hours nonstop. I mean, it's just, you'll be wealthy right there. Well, Kelly, we'll have to have you back. I want to touch base with you and follow up with you too. Love your thinking, love your approach, love your character, the foundation of who you are. I'm so glad we started there.
Yeah.
Because it really just makes a beautiful bed to help us to understand. And I have been blessed to meet these wonderful people that Tommy knows, and then he brings them to us.
Yeah.
And we've been blessed this morning by everything about you, your wisdom, your values, your humility. And I would say that's the other word that I want to go back, that imposter syndrome. I think that's an element of it, that when I've seen my wife do that, it's out of a place of humility, that sometimes she's not trying to overstate who she is. But we have seen beautiful humility in you today. It's been a blessing and a gift to us and those that have watched.
Same here. Yeah, just
absolutely.
Honor, really. Thank you for just giving me this amazing platform to talk about this, because so many people need to hear about it. And the more we ground ourselves and our values and how we express it, I just feel that could shift workplace cultures dramatically. And I love being a part of that. And thank you so much for allowing me to be part of this amazing show.
So we talk about this often, that to bring folks back. But Eric, I would like to bring Kelly back in the short term, maybe within the next month. We have a couple of guests coming up.
I totally agree, Tommy.
And so before we let you go, how might people get in touch with you to leverage your wisdom and your character and your beauty?
Thank you. Well, I'm on LinkedIn. That's basically how I meet most of my clients these days. My website is www.promote-leaders.com. And I think between those ways, you can certainly get in touch with me, schedule time. I'm more than honored to help people on their leadership journey.
Yeah, we are going to have a conversation, Tommy and I, about even talking to you about a regular rotation. I just think that you have so many powerfully positive things and rich things in who you are. There's a calming spirit around you. There's a wisdom and a brilliance that doesn't have to be boastful, but is there. And I think that you have something to offer people. You need as wide an audience as you can get, because you're a blessing. And Tommy, thank you for Kelly. We'll let you have the final word. Is there anything that you want to say to our community as we close out?
The one thing I want to make sure that you all understand is, being a leader, it doesn't mean you're a people manager. We are leaders every day in all aspects of our lives, in our communities, in our churches, in our homes. And so learning how to be a good leader, and that starts with learning yourself, is just a core component. So contribute where you can and serve where you can, because if we all work on this together, I think we've got a much better world ahead.
Awesome.
you.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you, community, for joining us for another of these weekly diversity conversations. Say some great things this week, and then we look forward to you joining us next week for another of these powerful diversity conversations.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Take care, everyone.